Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Leanne, and my goal here is to help you get daily bite-sized chunks of biblical wisdom and encouragement, specifically to help you if you are overwhelmed with trying to understand the Bible, if you're brand new to studying or reading it and just can't make sense of it all. That's what I'm here to help you with. So today I want to share with you how to read the Bible as a brand new, like total beginner when you have ADHD. I know this is a struggle for so many people. I have ADHD, and where most of my younger life it was a curse, I've actually learned to turn it into a blessing and harness the power of it. But I will tell you, when I finally started sitting down to read the Bible, because just FYI, I came to Jesus much later in life. And so I did not grow up being all church lady and all of that. It was very, very late in life, like within the last 10 years, and I'm 51. So at this stage of my life, it's like, hey, I really need to start reading the Bible. I need to grow closer to God. And I opened up that book and I was like, right? I had no rhyme or reason or what I was doing. For one, I didn't know where to start. But on top of that, as soon as I'd open it, the squirrels started coming out. If you have ADHD, you know what I'm talking about. Those squirrels and butterflies and shiny things just start running rampant as soon as you try to focus on anything. And also, I know part of that was the enemy throwing stuff at me to get me from actually diving in deeper. So I'm going to share with you, I've not mastered it. I still struggle with the squirrels, but I'm going to share with you some of the things, some tips, 5 tips actually, that have helped me stay more consistent and actually understand and remember the things that I'm reading in the Bible. Because believe it or not, the Bible is so interesting. It's better than any Lifetime drama, y'all, like for reals. But most people don't ever get into it enough to start finding these really like crazy stories, but also stories of hope and encouragement, which is the things we so much need right now. And so, when I say like my ADHD runs rampant, and I want to say this because I know somebody out there is going to resonate with what I'm saying. When I was in school in my younger years, this was like way before ADHD was even a word. Like back then, we were just hyperactive and we needed to settle down, or we got sent to the principal's office, or we got dealt with when we got home, right? But now we know it's an actual condition, and people are given strategies and coping skills and things like that to manage it. But in school, like studying was just something I could not do. I could not sit down and do those bulk study sessions where everybody is at the library and has like all their books on the table. This was before the internet, of course. And, notebooks and highlighters and colored pens. I just couldn't do that. My brain would just go off into another dimension when I would try to do all that. I'm a very simple minded in a way, like I'm very to the point. Just tell me, just give me the Cliffs Notes, give me to the point. And so all this extra, it's very hard for my brain to wrap myself around. So when I first got into studying the Bible or reading the Bible, what did I do? I go to the internet and I go to YouTube and I go to social media and I start following all these people whose channels were about Bible study, and it was other women. And what I would find were these really beautiful, imagery of the Bible study aesthetics, where it's an open Bible and it has all the colored tabs and the beautiful calligraphy and the colored notes and the stickies and just all the things. And I was like, oh, that's so pretty. So maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. I love scrapbooking, so I could do this, right? I thought that's how you did Bible study. And so I started doing it, and I'm just like, yeah, I got nothing. Like, this makes absolutely no sense to me. And as a result, I got really, really discouraged. And as during this time, I was obviously growing a little stronger in and, closer to God, stronger in my walk with Him. And I finally one day heard Him say, Leanne, I don't want you to do what everyone else is doing. There is no one right way. All I want is for you to get in it. And so, for those of you out there who've really struggled with reading, studying the Bible, and just so you know, there's a difference. There's reading the Bible and there's studying. Reading is like you read through it. Studying is where you go in, you break down the verse, and then you break down the word and find the Hebrew and this and that. But when you are just getting started, you're not ready for all of that. At least I wasn't, because I was trying to do that I got discouraged and just gave up altogether. And that's kind of what the enemy wants, right? And so I like to relate this to just general everyday stuff. I like to, I don't know, read about maybe certain animals or birds, but I'm not ready to go in and study their entire anatomy, mating habits, all those things. I just like to bird watch. So there's a difference. You want an overview and have a general knowledge of something. And then there's the next level, which is diving deeper. But if you go straight into the deep end, when you're mentally still in that kindergarten phase, none of that's going to make sense and it's not going to stick. So I'm saying this for anyone watching this who has struggled with this to know it's okay if you are not ready to go into the deep end. I'll be honest, I'm not either. Breaking down Hebrew words and this and that. I mean, it's kind of cool when my pastor does it on the sermon slides on Sunday, but that's not how my brain is working at this season of my life. Even a few years ago, what I do now, I was not ready for. So I took it in small steps, kind of stuck my foot in, got a little bit, and was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And then took a little more. And so if you take anything away from this video today, as a brand new person studying the Bible, with or without ADHD, but just as a beginner, being overwhelmed with all of it and trying to replicate what you're seeing other people do, God just wants you to start at some point and start getting like, dipping your toe in, so to speak, and then easing your way out towards the deep end. How long that takes you to get there, every person's journey is going to be a little different. So with all that, let's kind of dive in. So these are the things that have helped me. And I'll be honest, I don't get it right all the time. I'm not absolutely 7 days a week in my Bible. I try to be. That habit of consistency has built up from what it used to be, but every day I try to do a little bit better. So here are the things that have helped me. Again, take it slow, do what works for you, and don't try to emulate what you see someone else do just because that's how you think it's supposed to be done. Find what's comfortable for you and what works with your brain chemistry and how your brain is able to consume data and make sense of it all. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, if you are brand new to studying the Bible, don't try to study it. Like that kind of contradicted like the whole point, right? Don't try to study it. Just read it. Studying is like advanced college, PhD level stuff for some of us newbies. Dip your foot in slowly by simply reading. And truth is, sometimes reading the Bible by itself could be overwhelming. That's where you can get these little like devotionals. This one is Joyce Meyer, Strengths for Each Day. It's like a 365 days. So every day you open it up, it's like one page. It has a verse, it has a devotional reading that explains what the verse is, but more importantly, like what does it mean for me? Like how do I apply it for my life? And that is actually how I got started. I started with those before I ever even opened my Bible to read it, like literally open my Bible every morning. I didn't even do that until much later. I started with those devotionals because they were small, bite size, and my brain could easily handle that. Too much more. And by the time I got to page 2, I was like, chasing my chickens in the backyard or something. Like that's really me. Side note, just to let you know how bad my ADHD is, I will tell my kids, we need to go to the store. And so they will go get in the car. I get my shoes on. I got to go let the dogs out real quick. They come back in. On my way back, I see there's a dish. So I'm like, let me wash this real quick. On the way out to the car, I walk out the front door. I see weeds in the walkway. So as I'm walking to the car, I'm like, oh, let me pick the weeds. 30 minutes later, I'm finally in the car. That is what it's like to have an ADHD brain. The lack of focus is real. All right. So if you struggle, you are not alone. Okay, so don't try to study it. Just simply start reading it. If a 3-minute bit of you reading each morning is all your brain can handle, then just go with that. Nowhere in the Bible does it says you need to spend 30 minutes to an hour in God's word every single day. It just doesn't say that. Take it in stride of what your brain can handle until it can handle a little more. Okay, number 2. So with those, like I said, I started with this, and then eventually I would start taking the verse from and I have like a whole stack of these, like there's like a whole stack right there. What whatever the verse was, I would then go open my Bible. But this was like the next level. But I didn't have just any Bible. It is very important, if you are brand new to all this Bible study stuff, that you get a Bible that your brain works with. So I was in my 40s when I went and purchased a Bible, because I had been away from God my entire young adult life up until that point. But the last time I did know about Bibles was when I was younger, and there was like one. So imagine my surprise when I walk into the Mardell store, because that's where everyone said to go, and there's like this wall of Bibles. I was like, oh my gosh, ADHD is like, I can't handle this. And so a few friends from church explained to me the whole different translations and why. And I finally settled with the NIV and NLT. Those, they're very, very similar, but they're in modern language. If you open the King James Version as a brand new, I've never read the Bible before, I've read it and I really wasn't paying attention, you will not make sense of it. It's written in the wherefore art thou kind of language, and it just doesn't make sense. Now, there's a lot of old school Christians, and I'm not saying they're, I'm not dissing them, but a more traditional Christians who've grown up in the church and it's been in the Bible their whole lives. They're very adamant that KJV is the only way to go, and any other translation is bad. But look, it needs to make sense for you before you can begin making sense of it. And so if you start with King James, it's not going to make sense to you. If you start with a different translation and then later you can go kind of compare it, Bible Gateway, YouVersion, all these apps enable you to compare side by side different translations. You get a better understanding. And so there is nowhere in the Bible does it says you can only use KJV. So if anyone's ever told you that, I'm sorry, they were wrong. That is just built into their mindset, and that's what works for them. And so many people think what works for me is going to work for everybody, and it just doesn't work that way. So you want to get a modern translation study Bible, not just a regular Bible, a study Bible. What is a study Bible, Leanne? I'm glad you asked. Unlike a regular Bible where you open the pages and it's just the verses of scripture, maybe a margin where you can write notes, a study Bible at the bottom here. So here's like the passages of scripture. And then at the bottom, there are these sort of summaries, narratives, commentaries, whatever you want to call them, that give you sort of a So it gives you like just a breakdown. It gives you a historical perspective, because remember, I think I had said before how as you're reading along something, there's a verse, but you have no idea what that verse means because it's out of place in the paragraph, but it's something that made sense if you read 2 chapters before, right? I mean, the Bible jumps around. Like the Bible has squirrels, y'all. It jumps all over the place. And so when you're reading a single passage of scripture, these commentaries at the bottom help you piece it all together so it makes sense in perspective and in context of everything else that's going on, like when it's happening, who's doing what, and why it was so important. This is so vital for you understanding. If you just read 1 or 2 verses, you're just like, oh, okay. But having that commentary explanation at the bottom was a game changer for me. So again, modern translation, study Bible. That is going to help you so much. Okay, so the third thing I want to share is, once you wake up, once you've had that coffee, those squirrels and hamsters start churning, and it's just like go time, right? And being able to focus on any one thing is almost impossible. So I have found for me, I wake up a little bit earlier. Now my kids are grown now, so I kind of have peace and quiet in the house up until a certain point. They still live at home, but they don't get up until much later. But I don't turn on the TV. I used to watch the news first and then try to do it. And by that time, I'm thinking about what I just saw on the news, and then I'd get frustrated. I don't turn on I have Air One playing all the time. I don't turn that on. I might have some like aesthetic music, but as long as there's no lyrics, no words being spoken, anything that has actual words, as soon as I start trying to read, my mind wants to ping in, like overhear the conversation. and it takes my focus away from what I'm reading. So I either have just the room, I have a fan, so it makes a little humming sound, or I might put on some white noise, like some, instrumentals or whatever, but no music that has actual words being spoken. That has been so helpful because there's no input kind of distracting me. The devil will still try to figure out how to distract you, but that one act has really helped me stay focused a little better than I was doing before. Okay, so actually that was number 4, no sound. So the last thing is, again, where do I get started? There are so many books. Do I start in Genesis? Do I just kind of open it and go here? So I already mentioned the daily devotional reading. These are like, there's so many of these. There's like a million of these that you can choose from by different authors. 3-minute pocket devotionals. They're so easy. So I literally have a stack of them over here. That's a great place to get started, to just dip your feet in the water. Start with those, whatever the verse of the day is. Go open your study Bible, read it, and then read the commentary. The second place to get started, don't just go with Genesis, and don't try to do it book by book, because again, it jumps around and it just starts not making sense. And you might end up in a genealogy lesson. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're not missing anything. It's like a whole chapter of just who had what kid, who had what kid, who had what kid, right? Like it's so boring. My brain just went, no. So don't do that. Start with certain characters. I personally like studying the women of the Bible. They're often overlooked in church sermons. I don't think by intention. It's just they often focus on some of the other, more like the prophets and the apostles and things like that, which those guys are important. But there are so many really great stories from the women. And by focusing on just that one character and everything she went through, and how she impacted history, or how she's connected with Jesus, those stories have really helped me get to know the Bible better. Honestly, of everything I've tried, starting with the stories of the women has been the most impactful, as beyond the daily devotional single verse read, because it's like a whole story, and so it makes sense, right? You can find short studies on the different women. You can find them on Amazon. I actually have some that I've written myself. They're very simple. It's like the overview, big picture of her story. Here's everything that happened. And then lessons that we take from the story. How is she connected to Jesus, like the lineage of Jesus, and then some study questions. They're very, very simple. That has been so helpful for me. Beyond the women, all the like popular stories that you may have heard, like Jonah and the whale, the walls of Jericho, the parables. Oh my gosh, nobody understands the parables. So taking a deeper dive into them with some good short studies that you can find is a really good place to start, because it's a condensed story. It's not just like you're reading through a chapter where it's kind of all over the place. Remember the squirrels that are all over the Bible? If you try to read it straight through, you're going to be running into squirrels all the time. So taking bite-sized chunks of popular Bible stories and breaking them down. And over time, you'll get to be able to piece them together, because you read about this person, then later you read this person, and then you realize those two are connected to each other. Like I read about Deborah and I read about Jael, and then I read that Jael was actually part of the prophecy that Deborah had spoken of, right? And so now it all makes sense to me, but reading it in order, it didn't make sense. And so that's really it. I hope this sort of makes sense. So just to recap, don't try to study it. Just start reading it little bits at a time. Number 2, study or read from a modern translation study Bible. Number 3, do it early in the morning before your hamster wheels get going and you get all those distractions entering your mind for the day. Number 4, do it with no vocals, like no radio, no TV, only maybe a slight humming sound or instrumentals or something like that. Silence, nothing that is inputting words or voices into your ears, because you need God's word to drown out all that, and you can't do that if it's constantly pouring in. And then finally, pick a story, pick a devotional, pick a character. And it's not just the women, by the way. The different apostles, the prophets, just random characters. There's like some different, I actually just finished up a study on the bad girls of the Bible, like the scandalous stories from the Bible, things that, people all think the Bible's all, everything's great, but it's not. There's a lot of really great dramas and stories with scandal and things that just we as humans tend to kind of are drawn to. I mean, that's why we watch Lifetime and all that kind of stuff on TV. Y'all, that stuff's in the Bible. But most people, newbies, really never get to that stuff because they give up because they're starting to get overwhelmed and just all over the place with it. So I hope this was helpful to anyone out there that's been struggling. I struggled with it for so long, y'all. I felt so inadequate around all my friends. And I tried group Bible study, but the problem is we were supposed to study and read the stuff before we got to the actual group study. And I just couldn't. So I would basically just kind of listen. And then, so I didn't get a lot out of that. Now I do get a little more because I know a little more. But in the beginning, group study just was not effective for me because I was the only one with the ADHD brain. But if you have at all felt overwhelmed and that you're just doing it wrong, or unfortunately, if other well-meaning Christians have kind of, looked down on you for you not studying every day, or you just your own self have felt, not worthy because you can't study it like everyone else. Remember, God makes each of us unique. He gave you that ADHD brain, okay? I used to struggle with that, by the way. I used to be like, why did God make me with this messed up brain? He didn't. I can do things now that other people can't do. I call it my superpower because I've learned how to harness the energy from it. But there was a time when I allowed it to impact how I felt about myself and my walk with God. And it impacted the growth. So don't do that. You're not alone. There are so many different ways that you can dive in here. And what matters is that you keep trying until you find the one that works for you. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. I would love to hear your feedback, your comments. If this was helpful, give the video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and also share it with someone else who might also be in the ADHD Bible study struggle mode. I would love to encourage and help them get more excited about this book because it is better than any magazine in the checkout aisle, y'all. You know what I'm talking about, those ones with the scandalous stories that we can't help but open the Bible. It's going to have such a better impact on your life moving forward than those magazines ever will. All right, bye. God bless.